to the point where I wasn't allowed to be in the same room as my cousins. And if they wanted to use the kitchen and I was in the kitchen, they would go tell Jodi. Jodi would scream at me to get out of the kitchen. And so they would use it. And I would just go stand in the hallway and wait, duct taped. So, and then be just constantly told over and over and over again, no one loves you. You're a manipulator. You destroy people's lives constantly. But yeah, it's just.
So this is Jessie, and they are the niece of Jodi Hildebrandt. Of course, Jodi Hildebrandt is being arrested alongside Ruby Franke, and this is what a large portion of today's video is going to be about. Jessie is related to Jodi via Jessie's dad. So Jessie's dad is Jodi Hildebrandt's brother. Now, Jessie was raised Mormon, whole family Mormon, now come out as atheist. They also go via they them pronouns, so I would appreciate it if everyone else would respect that within the comment section. I know that you guys will. They retell horrific stories of abuse, long-standing abuse within Jodi's care, and we're going to be getting onto that in a portion of today's video.
Mothers and fathers, men and women, teens alike, moving forward throughout this planet and learning how to live principles of truth so that they actually have this beautiful outcome of connection.
We all knew that Jodi Hildebrandt had a few screws loose, that her views are extremely twisted. We know that she has an unbelievably bad reputation of being a counsellor, a therapist, a marriage counsellor. She was actually working alongside the church. She was actually assigned by the bishop. She was literally assigned to treat people with supposed, porn addictions and all sorts. And she was even a family counsellor, okay? So she was actually being recommended by the church to these families. And the things that these families have to say, if you go and have a little look on this website, you'll see exactly what I mean. But I didn't realise that this situation, in the fact, it is eerily similar. The things that are coming out about the duct taping and the wanting to keep Ruby Franke's kids away from other kids. Jessie's story is heart-wrenching. It's very in-depth, details all sorts of things which clarify and make what is happening right now. It makes it make a lot more sense. So we're going to be getting right on into that and just share my thoughts and feelings about it and just share it with you. It comes from the Mormon Stories podcast, which, by the way, is amazing. They've done a couple, I think about 2 or 3 different episodes now, and each of them have been really, really insightful. He is an ex-Mormon himself, and it's just really insightful to actually hear from someone who comes from Mormon culture, and Jessie does as well. Jessie grew up Mormon. We're going to get more into that, but yeah, it honestly, it makes you realize a lot of things.
I'm going to call for initial appearance is Ruby Franke, case number 2315017664. Mr. Winward, how are you?
Very good.
So you represent Miss Franke?
I do. He is on the video with us.
Okay. Miss Franke, can you hear me?
Yes.
Have you received a copy of the information in this case?
Yes.
Miss Franke's being held on a no bail hold at this point. She's going to remain on a no bail hold for the time being.
So yesterday, Ruby and Franke actually appeared for the very first court hearing, and it was basically to determine whether or not they were getting bail or not, and they're being held without bail. And supposedly Ruby is actually being transported to a separate unit. It says both women were ordered to be held without bail. Their bond hearings are slated for 21st September. Miss Franke has reportedly been relocated to the medical unit of the jail, but the reasons for her move are unclear. I find it interesting how it says Ms. Is that how you say it? Ms. Franke instead of Mrs. Franke. I don't know. I swear they are still married. Whatever. There's far bigger fish to fry in this situation. And then what went on Thursday, which confused me, it confused a lot of other people, but they had a separate hearing for, I think it was for like custody for the time being. This is where I got a bit confused. I was like, wait, are they appearing in court twice? No, this is their very first, like, you know, court hearing. And then they then had their like custodial arrangements. And this is where shit hit the fan, basically. Ruby turned around and said this, basically, that children are abusing other children and their 3-year-old watches pornography, etc., etc. It was brutal to read, it was nasty, and I don't believe it. I don't believe it for a second. And anyway, I will leave the article linked up here. We can go click on my last video, or just go read anything else that gives you a bit more information into that. But a lot of people's reactions were the same.
So do you believe the allegation, sir?
No comment, like I told you.
Sort of shocking allegations, though.
A lot of people were then directing me and said, you should go and watch Jodi Hildebrandt's niece.
She pulled me out of bed by my hair, blindfolded me, tied my wrists, tied my legs, put me in the car, and just started driving. And I think we stopped at what I'm assuming at a gas station. She screamed at me to lay on the ground because I was manipulating people. If people could see me, I was manipulating them into thinking something was wrong. So I laid on the ground of her car, and she drove for what felt like hours.
Jodi Hildebrandt's niece has come on, and they have basically told their version of events of when they were literally forced to live with Jodi because they were supposedly misbehaving at home, even though it honestly was not misbehaving. And they detail the absolutely shocking things that they had to go through, such as being made to sleep outside in the snow, being duct taped, not being allowed to be around other children. Where does that remind you of? Being told that Satan lives within you, and if anyone were to feel sorry for you, then it would be a form of manipulation. Doesn't that sound like something they would both say? Ruby and Frankie, I mean. Honestly, the details, basically shaving their hair, anything that brought them joy, as they put it. And the whole aim of it was basically breaking them down to get them to confess, to get them to rid themselves of Satan, because in Jesse's own words, this is what Jodi believed. Jodi was a very strong believer that God, whoever, whatever, you can tell I'm not religious, spoke through her. That's what Jodi believed. Jodi believed that she had a mission and that she was sent from whoever, whatever, on a mission to try and rid the world of Satan. Because Jesse was going through some trouble being seen, heard, or anything by their family, and it ended up pretty badly with their family basically just dropping them off one night at Jodi's. They basically just left them there because Jodi said that she would help. And what ended up happening is just really quite nasty. And you can really see the parallels between Jesse's story and then also the allegations that Ruby is making about her own children.
It was Jodi and my grandparents telling me that my family had left and I wasn't going with them and that my life was about to change pretty dramatically. Restrictions were lighter. But everything was revolved around my worth. So anything that gave me a sense of worth, I was not allowed to have anymore. I had really long hair that I loved. Had to cut it all off because it gave me a sense of worth. Going to school gave me a sense of worth, not allowed to do it. I was homeschooled for, I think, about half a semester until I was not allowed to go to school at all. And I was very good at school and I really liked school. But again, anything that gave me a sense of value or a sense of worth, I wasn't allowed to do. because it was ego and it was bad and it was distraction for like from the darkness that was inside me.
Now, Jessie reiterates this several times, actually quite a lot during this whole 3 and a bit hours. And they're basically saying that Jodi was absolutely convinced that the devil was inside of them, that Satan was inside of them, and that they had to just purge everything that they loved. There's lots and lots of instances of really horrible abuse, which I'm not going to get into every single claim because this video would go on for a very long time. But not only that, but I really just wanted to point out the similarities between what they are saying and what is going on with their now claims, and not just their now claims of children being sexually abusive towards the other kids. Not just that, but the state in which the kids were found. The kids were found during a time where they were duct taped. Not just that, but they were also not being sent to school. Now, how long were they not being sent for school for? We do not know. But if Jodi was doing this with her own niece about, you know, restricting and taking away anything that they loved, limiting food was a very big one. Jessie does go into detail about this, about the times that they then tried to run away and they were skin and bone. They were extremely skinny. Jodi used to quite literally make them run up and down hills and things to try and purge them and get them to confess stuff, which to me sounds batshit crazy. I think Jodi sounds like completely mad, like completely. I really don't like using the word crazy, but I don't know how else to describe her. She's like beyond. And these are the kind of things that her own niece is coming out and saying. And some of these techniques that Jodi was using to try and get them to confess or to repent, etc., some of the absolutely horrible things they were putting Jessie through are some of the things that Ruby and Jodi are now being done for. A lot of people have been saying it. A lot of people have said that Jodi really is a criminal mastermind, and even though Ruby is trash, even though she is a trash parent, even though she has done some really horrible things to her kids, I mean, mentally abusing them, and now we know that there's a physical aspect to it as well. There's been a lot of speculation. Well, Jodi targets people. Jodi likes to basically bend people to their own will. She likes to kind of run a lot of power over people, and this is how she manages to convince people to leave their husbands and do this to their own children.
But Jodi started, from what I understand, this whole process of like destroying people's lives, I think very young. I know that she like was trying to ruin someone's like a teacher's life, and again, this is really hard. I don't know if there was truth to this. I think she was like trying to get a teacher fired when she was in high school. She got her therapist's license taken away. I don't know if if it started out as truth, as like she was doing something that needed to be done, and then that spiraled into what she's doing now, or if this has been like this type of behavior from the beginning. I don't know.
And the problem with all of this as well is that as Jodi managed to get more and more clients and climb higher up the kind of therapy ladder, I suppose, she was actually a very successful therapist, but it was because she was quite literally being recommended by the church. And the church knew about what Jodi was doing to Jessie, which makes this whole situation really messed up. I mean, it got to a point, in Jessie's own words, that they were having to wear duct tape across their mouth because evil would come out, or whatever the hell Jodi was going on about. And this is a child. I just think that it's absolutely diabolical. And the church was still recommending Jodi out, still recommending her to families and people with supposed porn addictions. And the thing is that Jodi was actually going around telling Jessie that Jessie was addicted to masturbation, even though they didn't even really know what masturbation was at that age. They were addicted to drugs and alcohol, even though Jessie had never touched it. Do you see the similarities that are going on here? And after watching this, I'm like, there is categorically no way that Ruby and Jodi are telling the truth on this one.
Jodi told them that these children should not be around anyone else, that they were evil and they can't be around anyone else.
Other children, right? They can't be around other children.
They can't be around other children. They shouldn't be around other children because they're evil, or something to that effect. And this is exactly what she did to me. So the thing that I am finding, I'm having a lot of emotional reaction to, and it's complicated because I'm grateful, in a weird way, I'm grateful that she partnered with someone that has so much fame, because I don't think there was no way it would be getting the coverage that it's getting if she hadn't. But Jodi is the mastermind here, not Ruby. Ruby is still responsible and like should be arrested for harming her children for sure. And I'm sure Jodi like used what it was already there, which is what she does. She uses what's already there to her advantage.
Now, I well and truly understand what they're saying here, and this is what many people have always said, that Jodi needed to be investigated just by any, like, the public needed to be investigated. But as they were saying on this podcast, she was greatly protected by the church, and so not a lot was really done about it. But what Jessie is saying is a very good point. Jodi has always been like this from the very beginning, and supposedly she latches on to people who she'll be able to kind of coerce into what they want them to do. Because 8 Passengers did in fact garner a lot of attention, and they weren't awful from the get-go. Not awful from the get-go. The cracks started to appear showing, and I feel like a majority of the very heinous things that they would show on 8 Passengers did coincide with when Jodi came along. And you also have to remember that Jodi had already had connections set up, and Jodi was giving workshops to Kevin and Ruby at the very beginning. And I'm not sure why Jodi targeted Ruby, but as they put it, like, Jessie does have a good point in the fact that if Jodi hadn't have partnered up with Ruby, then Jodi may have just continued on down this path. And by the sounds of it, there must be a lot of other families out there who are still dealing with the trauma that Jodi has brought them. I've actually seen a couple TikToks recently, which I'll flag it up right here, of people saying they were my family therapist for ages. Because she was very well known and she was being recommended out, and the church was protecting them.
I ran away 3 times from her house. I went to a neighbor's. I went to the police. They didn't do anything. Because Jodi is the most convincing person you'll ever meet. The last time I met up with Alex, this was a couple years ago, she said something that I think is like so perfectly articulated into describing how manipulative and convincing Jodi is. And she said, I cannot be around my mom. I can't ever be around her again, because if she told me the sky was yellow, I would believe her. She has this ability to like alchemize, like just get into your soul. It's like, it is horrifying.
And the thing is that there was no rhyme or reason as to why Jodi was targeting Jessie. In a normal mindset, I will say, in a mindset like a lot of us, the things that Jessie was doing was just nothing bad was really happening. They were not misbehaving. They were doing great at school. They were just a little bit different. They were into art. They weren't into the regular thing that the rest of the family was. Like I say, they grew up Mormon and now they are atheist. Jodi had Jessie believing that, you know, Satan was inside of them, and that when Jessie was forced to write a confession every single day, locked up in a room of Jodi's, they honestly believed that it was their own fault that Jodi wasn't happy with what they were confessing, because they weren't done purging Satan or, you know, getting the darkness out of them. This is something that Jodi has managed to convince her own niece and other people as well. She has absolutely no business just being around society. I'm going to be completely honest. And as soon as you realize all of this about what Jessie has been saying, you start to think back to all of the punishments that you've witnessed, that you've seen Ruby giving her kids, taking away the beds, taking away food, saying, well, if you don't do this, you're gonna, like, taking away basic human, necessities, rights, taking away that, stripping them of their own identity, as Jessie puts it. It does seem very much Jodi influence. And I'm not saying for a split second, and no one is saying this, that Ruby is not to blame. Ruby is just as much to blame as Jodi. But it is important to now think about where that influence came from. And if Jodi is such a big influence, and she has been known, it has been said that she has literally managed to tear up families, ruin everything. Jessie was also talking about, because Jodi does have 2 kids. I don't think, one of them definitely doesn't talk to her, and the other one Jessie didn't mention, probably for privacy reasonings. But Jodi tried to completely destroy her ex-husband's life, like completely tried to get him like ostracized from the church, etc., for no good reason, because apparently her ex-husband's actually really quite nice. And even Jessie says that there is some closeted, like, suppressed homosexuality going on.
She said something to the effect of, yes, being gay is evil and, pleasures of the flesh and yada, yada. But if I were to have sexual relationships with my friends, if we were to, it would be different because there's a deep emotional connection there. And that's different. And we were sitting in someone's living room and she said this and I was just like, what? Yeah, that's called being gay. What do you think gay relationships are like? They are emotional and deep and connective and yeah.
Which once again is just painting Jodi out to be someone who feels like her own needs are of a higher importance and she has a higher emotional capacity than anyone else. And she, in Jessie's own words, Jodi honestly thought that she was doing that she was serving a mission, that she was literally freeing the world of evil. And some people may assume like, oh well, that's probably probably right. And I thought that all along, but I didn't realize it was so deeply entrenched. Like, this is quite literally Jodi's only mission, and it is beyond. It's disgusting in the way that it has turned out, but it's for the sake of society that she is kept away. I really do urge you guys to go and watch that podcast. Of course, I'm not going to include everything that Jessie had to say, because a lot of it is very much their own story to tell. It's their story to tell. It's not mine. I'm not going to break down everything. I'm not going to react to it or anything like that. I just wanted to bring the focus back to the fact that now Jodi and Ruby are going on this sort of campaign of, well, the kids can't be around other kids, and this is what they're doing, this is what they're doing. And it's bollocks. And, it's utter bollocks. They did this. Jodi did this to her own niece, made Jessie feel like Jessie couldn't even talk to people, to wear duct tape around their mouth because evil might come out, kept them ostracized. The church knew about it. And I keep on bringing that up, and it's not because I'm like anti-religion or anything. It's the fact that the Mormon podcast, the guy on there is very vocal. He's ex-Mormon, very vocal about how he feels about the church keeping things secret and the church covering up for things. And it's very interesting to listen to.
The intensity, but the frequency and the longevity of it. Like, being told you're evil once, it's awful. But when it's all day, every day, and that on top of like feeding into a system that already exists, feeding into a narrative that already exists.
But just hearing about a situation that eerily, the punishments and you can almost, after listening to Jessie speak, you can visualize and you could understand a horrible, twisted, morbid way. You can understand Jodi's thought process a lot easier hearing it from someone that is not only had an extremely horrific, traumatizing experience, but is also within the family. and it provides a lot of context. And context in a situation is absolutely key, because the majority of us are not going to understand how and why two women would choose to do that to children. And it's honestly diabolical. I hope you guys have a wonderful day wherever you are in this world. Take care of each other, take care of yourselves, and I'll catch up with you guys in the next video.